It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker and the president of Pre-College Student Council, Irene Huang. Irene joined the Pre-College in 2020, studying with Sandra Shen. She stepped into the role of Student Council President in 2023 and has since led many different initiatives to support our student body, including the creation of our Student Council committees, and leading a number of community events over the years, like our holiday party, our Halloween celebration, and a few different Student Council benefit concerts. We are grateful for Irene's leadership, and we're wishing her all the best as she graduates today and heads to Columbia University this fall. Please join me in welcoming Student Council President Irene Huang.
Good morning, everyone. I know we're so excited to rush out the door and declare ourselves as graduates. I remember coming to commencement each year since high school, marveling at the graduating class in awe. Sorry, let me adjust the mic just a little bit. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who made this very milestone possible. To the incredible SFCM team, thank you so much for keeping the Saturday musical circus running smoothly. To Dean Keelan Davis and Laura Reynolds, thank you so much for your vision and your leadership, for creating an environment where we could all discover our voices as musicians. To our coordinator, Jenny Ma, thank you so much for the behind-the-scenes logistics and coordinating all the chaos of recitals. Thank you all for your tireless dedication to our education and our futures, even through the endless logistical nightmares we put you through. You've built a second home for us. To the parents, the grandparents, and the families, thank you for the thousands of hours you spent in the car driving us to lessons, the endless tuition checks, and listening to us practice the same 4 measures of a concerto out of tune for 6 months straight without losing your minds. We wouldn't be standing on the stage without your unyielding belief in us. To our teachers, thank you for not giving up on us when we showed up to a lesson sight reading the piece, and for teaching us that music is so much more than just playing the Flight of the Bumblebee super fast. And special thanks to my private teacher, Miss Sandra Wright Shen, who isn't here today, but most definitely in spirit. She's in LA, by the way. You are my hero. And finally, to my fellow graduates, we made it out. We survived the juries, the nerve-wracking recording sessions, and 8:30 a.m. musicianship classes. It's funny to think where this all started for us, because before I even played my first real note on the piano, I was told that I could never become a pianist. I remember my first teacher squishing my hands around and delivering her verdict. My hands were too small. A real pianist needed to have long and slender fingers that moved seamlessly around the keys. I just had these hands that could still only barely reach an octave. My early relationship with piano could be summed up as doing anything to avoid practicing. I feel like this is every kid's canon event. Did you guys flip through pages of comic books with your feet while holding an ice cream cone in one hand and running scales with the other, only to stop and pretend you were practicing the moment your parents walked into the room? Because I sure did, and I wasn't too slick with it. Although my first teacher told me that I couldn't become a pianist, like most of us here, I was very stubborn. I spent the next 10 years trying to prove anyone who doubted me wrong, and I tried to become the perfect musician, whatever that meant. At 14, I became obsessed with the piano, not necessarily with the music, but with the image. I watched the Van Cliburn Jr. competitors, and I really wanted to be like them. I wanted to be loved by the masses. So I followed every single piece of internet advice I received. I kept a practice journal that I quit after 3 weeks. I listened to only classical music, and I searched for the most niche recordings that I could recommend to my friends. I would say I was pretty performative. I was taught that a musician is a servant to the composition. We are told that we are second to the art, merely vehicles meant to translate someone else's legacy into a present reality. But at a certain point, I started to wonder, if we're forever bound to telling someone else's story, when do we get to tell our own? I'll reveal the ugly side now, the part we don't put on our resumes. Like many relationships, I fell out of love, and with music as well. By the time college applications rolled around, I was hollow. I spent so long trying to be a vessel that there was nothing left of me in the music. I wrote draft after draft of my Commencement essay about my broken dreams, and a teacher who read it looked at me in the eye and said four words that shattered my world. Just let it go. For 10 years, the piano had been my reason for sleepless nights and the few euphoric highs. My sense of worth had been tied to whether my name was printed on a small sheet of paper after a competition. After my college recordings were finished, I didn't touch the piano for weeks. The responsibility of having to execute a perfect performance terrified me. When I started to fall back into love with piano, it wasn't a major turning point or an earth-shattering moment. It was a lesson where I showed up totally unprepared to play Clouds by Florence Price. My teacher sat down, my new teacher, Miss Sandra Shen, and started to sight read the piece for me. She'd also never played the piece before, and there she was trying to play the piece that I'd given up on. There was beauty in that discovery as she created colors as she went through the piece and revealed little sparks of surprises. What that moment taught me was that we've been conditioned to think of ourselves as athletes of perfection. But we're only here for a limited number of years on Earth. We are not high-performance machines that can be optimized with 3-hour score study sessions and a perfect practice schedule. We are human beings who get burnt out, we get heartbroken, and we don't always want to perform for an audience. For a long time, I thought my desires, such as spending time with friends, reading comic books, and vacations where I didn't take my electric keyboard, were just obstacles to my progress. I thought they were parts of my life that were taking away from the music. But I've realized it's actually the opposite. If music is honest, then it has to come from a place of experience. If you haven't felt the specific kind of exhaustion, unexplainable with words, that come from taking off your dress shoes after a final performance or the warm glow of a summer afternoon, you have nothing to bring to the keys. Music isn't a separate, holy being that we have to sacrifice our lives for. In fact, it is the result of our lives. I looked at the lives of the composers we idolize and realized even for them, music wasn't a cage. It enhanced their lives. Alexander Borden was a chemist, and Charles Ives was a successful insurance executive. They weren't less of a musician because they had other professions. They were fuller humans. Their knowledge in craft and science and business didn't detract from the art, but rather gave their message a deeper meaning, more profoundly interconnected to humanity. When we try to become servants to the art, we end up trying to erase ourselves. Ironically, the music becomes more about our efforts rather than its true intentions. But the composers we study weren't trying to be invisible. They were living multidimensional lives, and their music was just a reflection of that. Music and love are intertwined, and like any real love, it needs room to breathe. You don't have to unconditionally serve someone you love. You have to be a partner, to collaborate and compromise. I decided not to do a senior recital this year. Instead, my teacher and I spent lessons simply learning the Chopin Nocturne, Opus 9, number 2, a piece I'd always wanted to play but could never fit into a competition program. I played it for the little girl dancing in the living room to that song years ago, the one who didn't care yet about how clean her passages were. Some of you will leave this room today and walk onto the world's greatest stages. Some of you will pursue your other passions and play for yourselves in a quiet room surrounded by friends and family. Both paths are brave and true. Because music doesn't care about how big your hands are, how neat your practice journal is, or how many niche recordings you can name. We spent years chasing perfection as if we were curators in a museum, polishing someone else's creations. But today, I'm asking you to stop being curators. Be an architect, be a chemist, be unafraid to make mistakes, to step out of line of what you think is the right thing to do. We are not just the future of music. We are its present reality. We have the power to keep these stories alive. So go out into the world and play the music only you can play, the lives only you could live, and build a future that is truly yours. Congratulations, class of 2026. We made it. Now make some noise.